The spring of 1815 brought unseasonably cold winds to London, rattling the windows of the grand townhouses along Grosvenor Square. Inside the opulent ballroom of Lord and Lady Cunningham's residence, however, warmth radiated from hundreds of candles reflected in gilded mirrors, and the air hummed with conversation, laughter, and the elegant strains of a string quartet. Sebastian Hartley, the 6th Duke of Ravencrest, stood near a marble column, a glass of champagne in his hand that he had barely touched. At 30 years of age, he cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just so across his forehead, and eyes the colour of storm clouds that seemed to see through every pretense. His title was ancient, his fortune vast, and his reputation as London's most eligible bachelor was unassailable. "Your Grace," simpered Lady Victoria Huntington, approaching with a flutter of silk and ostrich feathers, "how delightful to see you this evening. I was just telling Mamma that your presence elevates any gathering." Sebastian offered a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Lady Victoria, you are too kind." She positioned herself strategically, ensuring her décolletage was displayed to advantage. "Perhaps you might claim the next dance. I have been practicing the quadrille most diligently." "I fear I am poor company this evening," Sebastian replied smoothly. "A matter of business weighs upon my mind." It was the same dance he performed at every ball, every soirée, every musicale. Beautiful women, and their ambitious mothers, threw themselves at him with increasing desperation. They saw only his title, his wealth, his connections. Not one had ever asked him what he thought, what he felt, what kept him awake at night staring at the ceiling of his bedchamber. He was thoroughly, devastatingly bored. "Your Grace seems distracted," observed his closest friend, Lord Edmund Fairfax, joining him with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. "3 matrimonial prospects have approached in as many minutes, and you've dispatched them all with your usual cold efficiency." "Edmund, I am 30 years old. I have attended these wretched events for 12 years. Every season brings a fresh crop of debutantes who recite the same practiced compliments, simper the same empty smiles, and demonstrate the same appalling lack of genuine character." "Perhaps you're looking in the wrong places," Edmund suggested, his hazel eyes scanning the ballroom. "Not every woman here is a fortune-hunting viper." "Name one." Edmund opened his mouth, then closed it, conceding the point with a rueful grin. The evening dragged on. Sebastian danced obligatory waltzes with titled ladies, who breathed practiced sighs against his shoulder. He made polite conversation with ambitious mothers who barely concealed their calculations of marriage settlements. He smiled, nodded, and felt his soul withering with each passing hour. It was nearly midnight when Edmund reappeared, his expression peculiar. "You must see this. If it's another eager debutante, it's the opposite. Come." Intrigued despite himself, Sebastian followed his friend through the crowded ballroom to where a small group had gathered near the refreshment tables. The crowd parted naturally as the Duke approached. It always did, and Sebastian found himself looking at a young woman unlike any he had encountered in London's glittering society. She was not a beauty by conventional standards. Her hair, a rich chestnut brown, was styled simply, without the elaborate curls and jeweled combs favored by fashionable ladies. Her gown, while respectable, was clearly from a previous season, the pale green silk showing slight wear at the edges. Her face was pleasant but unremarkable, a straight nose, a determined chin, eyes of clear hazel that regarded the world with unmistakable intelligence and a hint of defiance. What struck Sebastian most forcefully was her posture. While every other woman in the room angled herself to be noticed, to attract, to allure, this woman stood with her shoulders squared and her head high, as though she had no interest whatsoever in being observed. She was listening intently to Lord Cunningham, their host, her expression serious. "Most unfortunate situation," Lord Cunningham was saying. "Your father was a good man, Lady Arabella. His death is a loss to us all." "Thank you, my lord," the young woman replied, her voice clear and steady despite the sadness that flickered across her features. Papa faced his illness with remarkable courage. His primary concern, even at the end, was for Catherine and myself. The Earl of Willowmere left his affairs in good order, I trust. He did. Mr. Whitmore has been extraordinarily helpful in managing the estate. Papa appointed him as our guardian and trustee, which has provided us considerable security. She paused, then added with quiet dignity, We are not here seeking charity or advantageous matches, my lord. Catherine wished to experience at least one London season, and I could not deny her that pleasure. We will return to Meadowbrook Hall after the season concludes. Sebastian felt Edmund's elbow in his ribs. That, his friend whispered, is Lady Arabella Sinclair. Her father died 6 months ago. Word is she's managing the estate herself, with guidance from the solicitor. She's 21, unmarried, and by all accounts completely uninterested in London's marriage market. A woman uninterested in marriage? Sebastian's lips curved slightly. Impossible. She must be angling for a particularly wealthy catch. I don't think so. Watch. Lord Rutherford, a wealthy viscount known for his roving eye, approached Lady Arabella with the confident swagger of a man accustomed to female admiration. Lady Arabella, what a vision you are this evening. Might I have the pleasure of the next dance? Lady Arabella's expression remained polite but distinctly cool. I thank you for the honour, Lord Rutherford, but I am not dancing this evening. I am here solely to chaperone my sister. Surely one dance wouldn't compromise your duties, Rutherford pressed, reaching for her hand. She stepped back smoothly, putting space between them. I believe I was quite clear, my lord. I am not dancing. The dismissal was absolute. Rutherford's face reddened, and he retreated with muttered excuses. Sebastian found himself utterly fascinated. Here was a woman who had just refused a viscount, a perfectly respectable match for a woman in her circumstances, without a flutter of her eyelashes or a hint of maidenly confusion. "Introduce me," he said to Edmund. "Are you certain? She might refuse you as well." "All the more reason." They approached, and Lord Cunningham, seeing the Duke, immediately brightened. "Your Grace, may I present Lady Arabella Sinclair, daughter of the late Earl of Willowmere, Lady Arabella, His Grace the Duke of Ravencrest." Sebastian executed a perfect bow. "Lady Arabella, please accept my condolences on your father's passing." She curtsied, her movements graceful despite the simplicity of her attire. "Your Grace, that is kind of you." Her eyes met his directly, not with coy batting of lashes or calculated demureness, but with the straightforward gaze of one equal meeting another. It was so unexpected that Sebastian felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening in a room he had thought permanently sealed. "I understand you are managing Meadowbrook Hall," he continued. "That is no small undertaking." "It is not," she agreed, "but my father prepared me well, and Mr. Whitmore's guidance has been invaluable. The tenants are good people, and the land is productive. We shall manage, I have no doubt. Would you honour me with a dance?" The words left his mouth before he fully considered them. He never asked for dances. Women begged them from him. Lady Arabella's expression shifted, a wariness entering her eyes. "I thank your Grace, but I am not dancing this evening. My sister Catherine is recently arrived in London, and I prefer to remain available should she need me." "Your devotion to your sister is admirable," Sebastian said smoothly. "Perhaps later in the season, then?" "Perhaps," she replied, in a tone that clearly meant unlikely. Sebastian felt Edmund's barely suppressed amusement beside him. For the first time in years, a woman had refused him. For the first time in years, he was genuinely interested. "Might I at least procure you some refreshment? The evening is warm." "I am quite comfortable, Your Grace, but thank you." She was dismissing him. Actually dismissing him. The Duke of Ravencrest, whom women schemed and plotted to be near. "I see I am keeping you from your duties," Sebastian said, inclining his head. "I shall not monopolize your time further. Good evening, Lady Arabella." "Good evening, Your Grace." As he walked away with Edmund, his friend erupted into quiet laughter. "Goodness gracious, did you see her face? She looked at you as though you were a particularly persistent mosquito." "She is interesting," Sebastian said thoughtfully. "She refused you twice." "Precisely." Edmund stopped walking, studying his friend's face. "Oh no, that look, I know that look. Sebastian, please tell me you're not about to embark on one of your campaigns." "I merely find her refreshing." "She clearly finds you tedious." Sebastian smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually austere features. "We shall see about that." The following morning, Lady Arabella Sinclair sat in the modest drawing-room of the townhouse they had let for the season, reviewing the household accounts by the wan light filtering through rain-streaked windows. The weather had turned foul overnight, matching her mood. "Bella, you're frowning again," her sister Catherine observed from the settee, where she was embroidering roses onto a handkerchief with meticulous care. At 18, Catherine was everything Arabella was not. Delicate, beautiful, with golden hair and blue eyes that made men stammer. She was also genuinely kind, which made her loveliness bearable. "These accounts won't balance themselves," Arabella replied, squinting at Mr. Whitmore's careful notation. "The roof needs repair before winter, but we must also set aside funds for the spring planting. Mr. Whitmore will advise you, he always does." Catherine set down her embroidery and came to sit beside her sister, taking her hand. "You carry too much, Bella. Last night at the ball, you didn't dance once. You should have enjoyed yourself." "I enjoyed watching you dance. That was pleasure enough." "You refused the Duke of Ravencrest," Catherine said softly. "Do you know what the other ladies were saying? They thought you'd gone mad." Arabella's jaw tightened. The Duke of Ravencrest can have any woman in London. He was merely being polite to the unfashionable spinster, standing awkwardly near the refreshment table. "You are not a spinster. You are 21. Ancient by London standards." Arabella released her sister's hand and returned to the accounts. "Catherine, men like the Duke do not genuinely pursue women like me. He was making conversation out of obligation, nothing more. I saved him the trouble of pretending interest." "What if his interest was genuine?" "It wasn't." "How can you be certain?" Arabella set down her pen and looked at her beautiful, innocent sister. "Because I am not a fool. I have a mirror, Catherine. I see what I am, plain-featured, unfashionable, with no dowry worth mentioning, and an estate that requires constant attention. A duke needs a wife who will grace his ballrooms and bear him airs while looking decorative. I am not that woman. I never will be. You are too harsh with yourself. I am realistic. There is a difference." Arabella softened her tone. "This season is for you, darling. You will make a brilliant match. You have every quality a gentleman could desire. That is what matters." Before Catherine could respond, their housekeeper, Mrs. Bellamy, appeared in the doorway with an expression of barely concealed excitement. "Lady Arabella, Lady Catherine, you have a caller." At this hour, Arabella glanced at the clock. It was barely past 11, too early for proper social calls. Mrs. Bellamy's eyes gleamed. "The Duke of Ravencrest, my lady." The accounts ledger nearly slipped from Arabella's fingers. "I beg your pardon? His Grace requests a moment of your time. He is waiting in the entrance hall." Catherine's face lit up with delight and mischief. "The Duke of Ravencrest here, and you insisted his interest wasn't genuine." Arabella's heart began an uncomfortable hammering. "This is absurd. He must have the wrong address." "Shall I tell him you are not at home?" Mrs. Bellamy asked. Every fibre of Arabella's being wanted to say yes, but refusing a duke without explanation was unforgivably rude, and might create gossip that would harm Catherine's prospects. "No," she said reluctantly. "Show him to the drawing room. Catherine, you will remain with me." "Of course," Catherine agreed with a knowing smile. Moments later, Sebastian Hartley entered their modest drawing room, and Arabella was struck anew by how utterly out of place he looked. He was too large, too elegant, too overwhelmingly aristocratic for their simple furnishings. His greatcoat sparkled with rain droplets, and his dark hair was slightly damp, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous. "Your Grace," Arabella said, rising and curtsying, "this is unexpected. Lady Arabella, Lady Catherine." He bowed to each of them. "Forgive the early hour. I wanted to call before the afternoon rush of visitors." "We don't typically receive a rush of visitors," Arabella said bluntly, gesturing for him to sit. "May I offer you tea? That would be most welcome. The rain has turned quite cold." While Catherine rang for Mrs. Bellamy, Arabella studied their uninvited guest. His expression was pleasant, but his grey eyes held an intensity that made her profoundly uneasy. Men like him didn't make social calls on women like her without ulterior motives. "To what do we owe the honour of this visit?" she asked directly. Sebastian smiled. "I wanted to make your acquaintance properly. Our conversation last night was far too brief." "Your Grace is too kind, but surely you have more pressing engagements than visiting strangers." "On the contrary, I find myself with considerable free time and great curiosity about Meadowbrook Hall. I understand your father made significant improvements to the estate before his passing." Arabella's suspicion deepened. "He did. Papa was a progressive landlord who believed in investing in the land and the people who worked it. A philosophy I share. My own estate in Derbyshire has benefited greatly from similar improvements: crop rotation, modernized equipment, fair wages for tenants. Despite herself, Arabella felt a flicker of interest. You involve yourself in estate management. Most gentlemen of your rank leave such matters entirely to their stewards. Most gentlemen of my rank are fools. Sebastian accepted a cup of tea from Catherine with a nod of thanks. A man who doesn't understand how his wealth is generated deserves to lose it. It was exactly the sort of thing her father would have said. Arabella found herself grudgingly impressed, which only increased her wariness. They spoke of farming techniques, tenant relations, and land management, while Catherine sat prettily, smiling and saying little. The Duke's knowledge was genuine, his questions intelligent. He didn't condescend or mansplain, but engaged with her observations as though they came from an equal. It was disconcerting. After half an hour, Sebastian rose to take his leave. I have monopolized enough of your morning. Lady Arabella, Lady Catherine, thank you for your hospitality. You are welcome any time, Your Grace, Catherine said warmly. Arabella said nothing, merely curtsied. At the door, Sebastian turned back. Lady Arabella, there is to be a garden party at Richmond next week. Would you and Lady Catherine do me the honour of attending as my guests? That is most generous, Your Grace, but please. His grey eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. It would give me great pleasure. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why does the Duke of Ravencrest wish to entertain two women of no particular consequence? Because, Sebastian said quietly, I find you fascinating, and I would very much like to know you better. Before she could formulate a response, he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of sandalwood and rain. Catherine practically bounced across the room. Bella, the Duke of Ravencrest finds you fascinating. He's playing some game, Arabella said, her chest tight with an emotion she refused to name as hope. Men like him don't pursue women like me. There must be an angle. What if there isn't? What if he simply likes you? Then he's deceiving himself, and I won't be party to his delusion. Arabella gathered up the scattered accounts, her hands trembling slightly. We shall send our regrets for the garden party. Arabella Sinclair, you cannot refuse a duke. Watch me. But that night, lying in bed listening to the rain, Arabella couldn't stop replaying their conversation. The way he'd leaned forward when she spoke about drainage systems, genuinely interested. The way his eyes had warmed when she'd made an observation about crop yields. The way he'd said fascinating as though he truly meant it. She punched her pillow and rolled over, angry at herself for caring. It didn't matter what the Duke of Ravencrest said or did. She knew her place in the world, knew her limitations. Better to maintain her dignity and independence than to be humiliated by false hopes. But sleep was a long time coming. The rejection arrived the following morning in the form of a politely worded note delivered to Sebastian's townhouse on Berkeley Square. He read it over breakfast, his coffee growing cold as he studied Lady Arabella's precise handwriting. Your Grace, Lady Catherine and I are most grateful for your kind invitation to the garden party at Richmond. However, we find ourselves unable to accept due to prior commitments regarding estate matters that require our immediate attention. We thank you for your consideration and wish you a pleasant event. Your obedient servant, Lady Arabella Sinclair. Prior commitments, Sebastian murmured, setting down the letter. She's lying. His butler, Jameson, who had served the Hartley family for 40 years, permitted himself a small smile. Perhaps the lady genuinely has estate business, Your Grace. She's avoiding me. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Excellent. I fail to see what is excellent about rejection, Your Grace. Every other woman in London would have accepted immediately, then spent the entire event positioning herself to be noticed. Lady Arabella refuses outright. Sebastian stood, moving to the window overlooking the square. She's not playing the usual games. She genuinely wants nothing to do with me. And this pleases you? It intrigues me. Sebastian turned back to his breakfast, suddenly ravenous. Send flowers to Lady Arabella. Nothing excessive, a simple arrangement of spring blooms. Include a note expressing my disappointment and my hope that we might meet again soon. Very good, Your Grace. Over the following week, Sebastian launched what Edmund privately termed the campaign. Flowers arrived at the Sinclair townhouse every other day, never ostentatious, always tasteful. He engineered chance meetings at the Modista, where Catherine was having gowns fitted, at the lending library where Arabella went to procure agricultural journals, at the park where the sisters took their daily constitutional. Each time Arabella grew more distant, more guarded. "Your Grace seems to appear wherever we go," she observed coolly during their third accidental encounter, this time at Hatchard's bookshop on Piccadilly. Sebastian smiled, holding up a volume on modern farming techniques. "Great minds think alike, it seems. I was just admiring this treatise on soil composition. How remarkable. That is precisely the volume I came to purchase." "Then allow me to gift it to you." "Absolutely not." Arabella's hazel eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. "Your Grace, I appreciate your attention, but I must speak plainly. I am not interested in whatever game you are playing." "Game?" Sebastian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Lady Arabella, I assure you my interest is entirely genuine. That is precisely what makes it so insulting." Her voice was quiet, but fierce. "Do you think I don't know what I am? Plain, unfashionable, burdened with responsibilities that make me utterly unsuitable for society. I am not a fool, Your Grace. Men like you don't pursue women like me unless there is some ulterior motive." "What if there is no ulterior motive? What if I simply find your company more stimulating than that of every vapid debutante in London combined?" "Then you are either mocking me or deceiving yourself." Arabella clutched the book to her chest like a shield. "Either way, I want no part of it. Please, Your Grace, leave me in peace." She swept past him, leaving Sebastian standing amid the bookshelves with the uncomfortable realization that his pursuit was causing her genuine distress. That evening he sat in his study at Ravencrest House, staring into the fire with a glass of brandy untouched beside him. Edmund found him there near midnight. "The club was tedious without you," his friend announced, pouring himself a drink. "Lady Victoria asked after you. She's sharpening her claws for another assault on your bachelorhood." "Edmund, am I a monster?" "What? No, you're merely impossible. Why?" Sebastian repeated his conversation with Lady Arabella. Edmund listened, his expression growing thoughtful. "She doesn't believe you," Edmund said finally. "She can't conceive that your interest is genuine because she doesn't value herself. You're pursuing her, and it's making her feel mocked, humiliated. That's not my intention, isn't it? Think about it from her perspective. She spent her entire life being overlooked, and now suddenly the most sought-after man in England is showering her with attention. It doesn't feel real. It feels like a cruel joke." Sebastian closed his eyes. "What should I do?" "Give her space. If your feelings are genuine, they'll survive a strategic retreat. And perhaps—" Edmund paused, considering. "Perhaps she needs to realize what your absence feels like before she can appreciate your presence." It was sound advice, though it grated against every instinct Sebastian possessed. He was accustomed to pursuing what he wanted until he obtained it. But Lady Arabella Sinclair was not a business acquisition or a parliamentary vote. She was a woman whose trust he had somehow managed to forfeit before ever truly earning it. "Very well," he said finally. "I'll withdraw." "Completely?" "Completely. No flowers, no chance encounters, no further pursuit. If she wants nothing to do with me, I shall respect that wish." Edmund raised his glass. "To strategic retreats, the foundation of every victorious campaign." Sebastian didn't drink. He was too busy wondering if withdrawing was a brilliant strategy or the greatest mistake of his life. 3 days later, Arabella stood in her modest drawing room, staring at the empty table where fresh flowers had appeared with clockwork regularity for the past week. "No flowers today," Catherine observed, entering with her embroidery. "The Duke has finally accepted your rejection." "Good," Arabella said firmly. "It's exactly what I wanted." "Is it?" "Of course it is." The man was making a nuisance of himself. Catherine settled onto the settee, her needle moving with practiced precision. "You've been staring at that empty table for 10 minutes. I have not." "Bella, I'm your sister." "I know you." Catherine looked up from her embroidery, her blue eyes knowing. "You miss him. That's absurd. One cannot miss someone one barely knows. You spoke with him about estate management for an hour last week." You debated crop rotation with more passion than I've seen you display about anything since Papa died, and now that he's gone, you're miserable. I am not miserable. I am relieved. But it was a lie, and they both knew it. The truth Arabella would never admit aloud, was that the Duke's presence had made her feel something she'd thought impossible, interesting, valued, seen. For the first time in her life, a man had looked at her and noticed not her plainness or her unfashionable wardrobe, but her mind, her competence, her strength, and she had driven him away. The following week passed in a grey blur. Arabella threw herself into correspondence with Mr. Whitmore, planning improvements to Meadowbrook Hall with grim determination. Catherine attended soirees and musicales, returning home with reports of the Duke's activities that Arabella pretended not to care about. He danced with Lady Victoria 3 times at the Pemberton Ball, Catherine mentioned casually over breakfast. Arabella's marmalade-laden knife clattered against her plate. How nice for them. Lady Helena Worthington says he's finally ready to choose a bride. She thinks it will be Lady Victoria or possibly Lady Eleanor Fitzwilliam. Lady Catherine, unless you wish to discuss the merits of winter wheat versus barley, I suggest you find another topic of conversation. But that night, alone in her chamber, Arabella cried for the first time since her father's funeral. Not because she had lost the Duke, one couldn't lose what one never had, but because for a brief, shining moment, she had allowed herself to imagine a different life, a life where she was the sort of woman a Duke might genuinely love. It had been a foolish fantasy, and she was well rid of it. The annual charity auction at Devonshire House was the event of the season, an opportunity for London's elite to demonstrate their philanthropic generosity while displaying their wealth and consequence. Arabella had no intention of attending, but Mr. Whitmore arrived unexpectedly from Meadowbrook Hall with news that required her immediate attention. The Turner property, he explained, settling into her drawing room with his perpetual air of careful competence. Mr. Whitmore was perhaps 50, with thinning grey hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. It adjoins Meadowbrook to the east. Old Turner has died, and his heir is selling. If we could purchase it, we could expand the grazing lands significantly. How much? £3,000, more than we have liquid, but I could arrange a loan against next year's harvest. However, he hesitated. There's to be an auction this evening at Devonshire House. Several parcels of land are being sold to benefit the Widows and Orphans Fund. The Turner property is among them. If you attended, you could assess the competition and determine our strategy. Arabella's stomach sank. Mr. Whitmore, I cannot possibly. Lady Arabella, your father trusted me to guide you, and this is my guidance. That land could secure Meadowbrook's future for the next generation. You must at least try. So it was that Arabella found herself that evening in the ballroom of Devonshire House, wearing her best gown. A pale blue silk that Catherine had insisted made her eyes look luminous, and feeling utterly out of place among London's glittering elite. The auction was conducted with great ceremony. Various items and properties were presented, bid upon, and sold amid enthusiastic applause. Arabella stood at the back, her auction paddle clutched in nervous hands, waiting for the Turner property to be announced. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer proclaimed, "a fine agricultural parcel in Hertfordshire, 120 acres of prime grazing land with a serviceable barn and cottage. We shall start the bidding at £2,000. Arabella raised her paddle, her heart hammering. 2,000! Several other paddles rose. The price climbed quickly. 2,200, 2,500, 2,800. 3,000, Arabella called, reaching her absolute limit. There was a pause. She allowed herself to hope. Then, from across the room, a familiar voice said lazily, 3,500. Arabella's head snapped around. The Duke of Ravencrest stood near the front of the room, his paddle raised, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and Arabella felt something hot and furious rise in her chest. He was bidding against her, deliberately sabotaging her attempt to secure her family's future. 3,500 to His Grace, the Duke of Ravencrest, the auctioneer announced. Any advance on 3,500? Going once? Going twice? Arabella's mind raced. She didn't have 3,500, couldn't possibly raise it. The Duke knew that, everyone knew that. He was crushing her bid as casually as one might swat a fly. All her suspicions, all her certainty that his interest had been false, crystallized into righteous rage. "Sold," the auctioneer declared. "To His Grace the Duke of Ravencrest for £3,500. Polite applause rippled through the room. Arabella stood frozen, her entire body trembling with anger and humiliation. Catherine appeared at her elbow. "Bella, what just happened?" "The Duke of Ravencrest," Arabella said through gritted teeth, "has revealed his true character. Come, we're leaving." "But now, Catherine." They were halfway to the exit when Sebastian's voice stopped her. "Lady Arabella, a moment if you please." She turned, and whatever he saw in her face made him take a step back. "How dare you," she said quietly, aware of the curious eyes upon them. "How dare you pretend friendship, pretend interest, and then deliberately sabotage my family's welfare for your own amusement? Lady Arabella, if you would allow me to explain." "Explain what?" "That you bid against me on property you don't need simply to demonstrate your superior wealth and power. That you've been toying with me for weeks, and this is your final joke at my expense." Her voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. "I told you I wanted nothing to do with you. I told you to leave me alone, and this is your response? That is not— I don't want to hear it." Arabella drew herself up to her full height, which barely brought her to his shoulder. "Stay away from me, Your Grace. Stay away from my sister. And if you have any decency whatsoever, stay away from Meadowbrook Hall and anything connected to my family. I want nothing from you. Nothing." She swept past Catherine, hurrying in, leaving Sebastian in the middle of Devon. King realized catastrophically backfired. "You bought the property. You intended to gift it to—" "Obviously. And you didn't think to perhaps mention that before bidding against her in a public auction." Sebastian stopped pacing. I thought I could buy it and transfer the deed to her anonymously. That way she would have the land, and her pride wouldn't be wounded by accepting charity from me. Instead, she thinks you deliberately sabotaged her." "Yes. Thank you, Edmund. Your grasp of the blindingly obvious is remarkable." Edmund sighed. "What will you do now?" "I'll transfer the deed to her name tomorrow. She'll understand once she sees the paperwork." "Will she? Or will she think you're trying to manipulate her with a grand gesture?" Edmund fixed his friend with a serious look. "Sebastian, you cannot fix this with money or property. You've hurt her. She needs to hear that you're sorry, that your intentions were good even if your execution was disastrous, and that you value her far more than any piece of land." "She won't see me." "Then you'll have to be creative, because right now that remarkable woman thinks you're a heartless aristocrat who treats people as playthings. And she's not entirely wrong." Sebastian sank into his chair, his head in his hands. "I've made a complete disaster of this." "Yes," Edmund agreed, "but it's not irreparable. You care for her. Genuinely care for her in a way I've never seen you care for anyone. Fight for her, Sebastian. But fight smart. Fight with honesty and humility, not grand gestures and strategic maneuvers." After Edmund left, Sebastian sat alone in his study until dawn, staring at the deed to the Turner property and trying to find words that could possibly convey what was in his heart. He had spent weeks pursuing Lady Arabella Sinclair. He had employed every tactic, every strategy, every weapon in his considerable arsenal, and he had lost her. The only question now was whether he could find a way to win her back. Arabella spent the following week in a state of cold, controlled fury. She threw herself into household management with renewed vigor, answering correspondence, reviewing accounts, and planning for Meadowbrook Hall's future with grim determination. If the Duke of Ravencrest thought he could break her spirit, he was sorely mistaken. The deed arrived on a grey Tuesday morning. Mrs. Bellamy brought it to the breakfast table with an expression of confusion. "My lady, this was just delivered by a solicitor from Lincoln's Inn. He said it requires your immediate attention." Arabella broke the seal, unfolded the parchment, and felt the blood drain from her face. It was the deed to the Turner property, made out in her name, paid in full. Included was a brief note in masculine handwriting she recognized instantly. "Lady Arabella, this property should be yours. It was always meant to be yours. I bid at auction only to ensure it didn't fall into hands that might use it against Meadowbrook's interests. My intention was always to transfer it to you. I realize now how that must have appeared, and I am profoundly sorry for the distress I caused. You were right about me. I am an arrogant fool who acts without considering how my actions affect others. Please accept this with my sincere apologies. You owe me nothing. You never did. S.H. Bella? Catherine's voice seemed to come from very far away. What is it? Arabella handed her sister the deed and the note, unable to speak. Catherine read quickly, her eyes widening. Oh, Bella. He bought it for you. He was trying to help. He should have told me. But Arabella's voice lacked conviction. He should have explained before you publicly accused him of sabotage and cruelty, Catherine said gently. Would you have accepted if he'd offered it openly? Would you have believed his motives were pure? Arabella closed her eyes. The answer, of course, was no. She would have thrown the offer back in his face, accused him of trying to buy her gratitude or obligate her to his attentions. What have I done? She whispered. You protected yourself, as you always do. Catherine squeezed her hand. But perhaps it's time to stop protecting yourself quite so fiercely. Perhaps it's time to trust that someone might genuinely care for you. I was horrible to him. Yes, but if his feelings are genuine, he'll forgive you. And Bella, Catherine's blue eyes were serious. I think his feelings are very genuine indeed. Sebastian spent the week following the auction disaster, avoiding society as much as possible. He attended only essential engagements, spoke minimally, and deflected every attempt at matchmaking with barely concealed irritation. Your Grace seems out of sorts, Lady Victoria Huntington observed, during a musical at Lady Whitmore's residence. She had positioned herself beside him on the settee with the determination of a general planning a siege. Perhaps some pleasant company might improve your mood. I doubt it, Lady Victoria. You wound me, Your Grace. She placed her hand on his arm, her fingers trailing suggestively. I had hoped we might renew our acquaintance. We danced so delightfully at the Pemberton ball. Sebastian removed her hand with cool precision. You are a lovely young woman, Lady Victoria, but I am not suitable company this evening. Please excuse me. He escaped to the balcony, breathing in the cool night air and trying to calm the restless energy that had plagued him since the auction. He had done what Edmund suggested, sent the deed with an honest explanation and apology. Lady Arabella had not responded. Not a word, not a line, nothing. He took her silence as his answer. Brooding doesn't suit you, old friend, Edmund said, joining him on the balcony. You look positively gothic, like a hero from one of those novels ladies read. Lady Arabella hasn't responded to my letter. It's been 4 days. Precisely. 4 days of silence speaks volumes. Edmund leaned against the balustrade, studying Sebastian with concern. What will you do? Respect her wishes. Accept defeat. Move on with my life. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Though I confess the prospect of returning to my previous existence holds remarkably little appeal. Then don't return to it. You've changed, Sebastian. You've discovered you want something more than empty flattery and mercenary matchmaking. That's valuable even if you can't have the specific woman who awakened that desire. Sage advice. I'm riddled with sage advice. It's deeply annoying. Edmund straightened. Come, let's return inside before Lady Victoria sends out a search party. The woman has the persistence of a terrier. They re-entered the drawing room just as Lady Eleanor Fitzwilliam was concluding a pianoforte performance. Polite applause rippled through the assembled guests. Sebastian found himself scanning the room automatically, looking for chestnut hair and hazel eyes, before remembering that Lady Arabella would never attend such an event. Your Grace. Lady Whitmore materialized at his elbow, her smile calculating. How delightful to see you. Might I introduce my niece, Miss Thornbury? She's just arrived from Bath and she's most eager to make your acquaintance. Miss Thornbury, a pretty girl with auburn hair and too much enthusiasm, curtsied so deeply she nearly toppled. Your Grace, what an honor. I've heard so much about you. Sebastian summoned his social mask and made appropriate conversation, all while feeling as though he were watching himself from a great distance. This was his life. This was what he had to look forward to. An endless parade of interchangeable young women who wanted his title, his wealth, his consequence, and cared nothing for the man beneath. He had met one woman who saw him, one woman who challenged him, intrigued him, made him feel truly alive, and he had lost her through his own stupidity. The letter arrived at Ravencrest House the following morning. Jameson brought it to Sebastian's study on a silver salver, his expression carefully neutral. Sebastian's heart stuttered when he saw the handwriting. He dismissed Jameson with a curt nod and broke the seal with hands that weren't entirely steady. Your Grace, I received the deed and your note. I am writing to express my profound gratitude for your generosity and my equally profound mortification at my behavior at Devonshire House. I misjudged you terribly. I allowed my own insecurities and suspicions to blind me to your true character and intentions. You have been nothing but kind, and I repaid that kindness with accusations and scorn. I cannot accept the property. It is far too valuable a gift, and accepting it would place me under an obligation I could never properly repay. However, if you would consider selling it to me at the price I had intended to bid, £3,000, I would be deeply grateful. Mr. Whitmore assures me we can arrange suitable financing. I hope you can forgive my harsh words. You deserved far better treatment than I gave you. Your humble servant, Lady Arabella Sinclair P.S. If you are still willing to tolerate my company after my inexcusable behavior, I would very much like to speak with you. At your convenience, of course. Sebastian read the letter 3 times, his heart lifting with each pass. She was sorry. She wanted to speak with him. There was still hope. He called for his horse and was riding toward the Sinclair townhouse within minutes. Propriety be damned. Arabella was in the modest garden behind the townhouse, attempting to prune roses and mostly making a hash of it, when Mrs. Bellamy announced the Duke's arrival. Already? Arabella looked down at her gardening dress, an old faded thing covered in dirt. I'm not remotely presentable. His Grace says it's urgent, my lady. Arabella's heart began to race. Very well. Show him to the garden. She had barely enough time to remove her gardening gloves before Sebastian strode into the small garden, looking windswept and magnificent in his riding clothes. He stopped when he saw her, his grey eyes intense. Lady Arabella, Your Grace. She curtsied, acutely aware of the dirt on her dress, the perspiration on her brow, the complete absence of fashionable presentation. I apologize for my appearance. I wasn't expecting— You look lovely. His voice was rough. You always look lovely. The compliment, delivered with such fierce sincerity, stole her breath. Thank you. They stood awkwardly for a moment, the garden suddenly feeling very small and very intimate. Your letter, Sebastian said finally. You want to purchase the property? Yes, if you're willing to sell it. I'm not. Arabella's heart sank. I see. Then I must return the deed. I'm not willing to sell it because it's already yours. The deed is made out in your name. The property belongs to you free and clear, with no obligation whatsoever. I cannot accept such a gift. Why not? Because it's too much. Because it would place me in your debt. Sebastian stepped closer, his expression intense. You owe me nothing, Lady Arabella. Not gratitude, not obligation, and certainly not affection. I gave you that property because Meadowbrook needs it, and because you deserve it. That's the beginning and the end of the matter. But why? The question burst from her before she could stop it. Why do you care what happens to Meadowbrook? Why do you care what happens to me? Because He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Because, from the moment I met you, you have been the most fascinating, infuriating, remarkable woman I've ever encountered. Because you speak your mind and challenge me and see me as a man rather than a title. Because when I'm with you, I feel more alive than I have in years. Arabella stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. You cannot mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. But I'm not beautiful. I'm not accomplished. I'm not anything that a duke should want. Sebastian closed the remaining distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. You are everything I want. You are everything I never knew I needed. And if you'll permit me, I would very much like to court you properly, with your permission, with no grand gestures or strategic maneuvers, just me trying to prove that I'm worthy of your regard. Tears pricked Arabella's eyes. I'm the one who's unworthy. Then we're both fools. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. What do you say, Lady Arabella? Will you give us, a chance? She should refuse. She should protect herself. She should remember that fairy tales didn't come true for plain, practical women like her. But when she looked into Sebastian's eyes, she saw no deception, no mockery, only hope, vulnerability, and something that looked remarkably like love. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll give us a chance." His smile was like sunrise breaking over a winter landscape, transformative, warming, beautiful. "Thank you." He started to lower his head, then stopped, his eyes questioning. Arabella answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was soft, tentative, and absolutely perfect. When they finally drew apart, both breathing unsteadily, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "I should go. This is highly improper, and I don't want to compromise your reputation." "Probably wise," Arabella agreed, making no move to step away. "I'll call tomorrow. Properly. With flowers and a chaperone and all the correct social niceties." "I'd like that." He kissed her once more, briefly, sweetly, and then forced himself to step back. "Until tomorrow, then. Until tomorrow." Arabella watched him leave, her fingers pressed to her lips, her heart singing with a joy she'd never thought possible. She had taken a chance. She had trusted. And perhaps, just perhaps, she was going to find happiness after all. But London society, as Arabella was about to discover, did not take kindly to interlopers who disrupted the established order. The news that the Duke of Ravencrest was courting Lady Arabella Sinclair spread through the Tun like wildfire. Within days, every drawing room buzzed with speculation, gossip, and, in certain quarters, malicious planning. "It's absurd," Lady Victoria Huntington declared at a ladies' tea, her pretty face twisted with spite. "The Duke of Ravencrest courting that dowdy creature. She must have ensnared him through trickery. I heard her father left them practically destitute," Lady Eleanor Fitzwilliam added, stirring her tea with vicious precision. "She's clearly a fortune hunter of the worst sort." Lady Victoria's eyes gleamed with calculation. "Someone should warn His Grace. He's clearly been deceived about her character." "Someone should," Lady Eleanor agreed. "It would be an act of charity, really, saving him from such an unsuitable match." Across the room, Lady Beatrice Wentworth, a sharp-eyed widow in her 30s, watched the exchange with growing unease. She had met Lady Arabella at a literary discussion and found her intelligent, genuine, and utterly without guile. This attack was undeserved. "Perhaps," Lady Beatrice interjected carefully, "His Grace is capable of making his own decisions about whom to court." Lady Victoria turned to her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course he is. But men are so easily manipulated by clever women. It's our duty as his friends to ensure he sees the truth." Lady Beatrice said nothing more, but she made a mental note to warn Lady Arabella. The wolves were circling, and they would show no mercy. The warning came in the form of a morning call 2 days later. Lady Beatrice arrived at the Sinclair townhouse unannounced, her expression grave. "Lady Arabella, Lady Catherine, forgive the intrusion. I felt you should be made aware of certain developments." Arabella set down her teacup, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. "What developments?" "There is talk, vicious talk. Lady Victoria Huntington and Lady Eleanor Fitzwilliam are spreading rumors about your character and intentions. They're claiming you've ensnared the Duke through deception, that you're a fortune hunter who deliberately targeted him." Catherine gasped. "That's outrageous." "It's also effective," Lady Beatrice said grimly. "Society loves a scandal, and an unsuitable match between a duke and a woman of modest means makes excellent fodder for gossip. They're building a narrative where you're the villain and His Grace is the victim." Arabella felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "Of course they are. I should have known this would happen." "Bella, no." Catherine reached for her hand, but Arabella stood, moving to the window. "They're right to question it," she said quietly. "Why would the Duke of Ravencrest choose me when he could have anyone? It doesn't make sense. It will never make sense to them." "It doesn't have to make sense to them," Lady Beatrice said firmly. "It only has to make sense to you and His Grace." "But they'll make his life miserable. They'll turn society against him for choosing unwisely. They'll—" Arabella's voice broke. "They'll make him regret choosing me." "Then you must show them you're stronger than their gossip," Lady Beatrice said. "You must stand beside him with your head high and prove that you are exactly the woman he deserves." But Arabella barely heard her. All she could think about was Sebastian, brilliant, powerful Sebastian, being mocked and scorned because he'd made the mistake of caring for someone like her. Perhaps it would be better to end things now. before the damage to his reputation became irreparable, before she hurt him more than she already had. Sebastian learned of the rumors from Edmund, who arrived at Ravencrest House that afternoon with a thunderous expression. "Lady Victoria and her coven are spreading poison," Edmund announced without preamble. "They're destroying Lady Arabella's reputation and making you look like a besotted fool. Let them talk." Sebastian didn't look up from the correspondence he was reviewing. "Their opinions mean nothing to me. They should mean something. These women have influence, Sebastian. They can make Lady Arabella's life unbearable. They can turn the entire ton against her. Then the ton can go to the devil." Sebastian set down his pen, his expression hard. "I don't care what they think, Edmund. I care about Arabella. Does she know that? Does she know you're willing to weather this storm for her?" Sebastian paused. "I'll speak with her. Make sure she understands." But when he called at the Sinclair townhouse that afternoon, Mrs. Bellamy informed him that Lady Arabella was indisposed and unable to receive visitors. He returned the next day. Same result. And the day after that. On the fourth day, Catherine met him in the drawing room, her expression troubled. "Your Grace, I'm so sorry. She's not herself. The gossip has affected her deeply. Let me see her. Let me assure her that I don't care what they say. She won't see anyone. She barely leaves her chamber. She's convinced that your association with her is destroying your reputation and that the kindest thing she can do is end things before they progress further." Sebastian felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath him. "She's ending our courtship. She hasn't said so explicitly, but she's withdrawn completely. I don't know how to reach her." Sebastian stood, his jaw set. "Then I'll find a way." Because he was done with strategic retreats, done with giving her space, done with letting her protect herself by pushing him away. If Lady Arabella Sinclair thought she could save him by sacrificing their happiness, she was about to discover exactly how stubborn the Duke of Ravencrest could be. The letter arrived at dawn, delivered by Sebastian's own footman with instructions to place it directly into Lady Arabella's hands. Arabella sat in her chamber, the unopened letter on her lap, watching grey morning light filter through the curtains. She'd spent 4 days in this room, emerging only when absolutely necessary, convinced that her absence from Sebastian's life was the greatest gift she could give him. Catherine had begged her to reconsider. Mr. Whitmore had expressed concern. Even Mrs. Bellamy had offered gentle counsel. But Arabella remained resolute. She would not be the reason Sebastian's reputation was destroyed. Now, staring at the sealed letter bearing the Ravencrest crest, her resolve wavered. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. "My dearest Arabella, I understand you are attempting to protect me from gossip and social censure by withdrawing from our courtship. It is a characteristically noble gesture from a characteristically noble woman. It is also completely unacceptable. I am not a child who needs protection. I am not a fragile creature whose reputation will shatter under the weight of wagging tongues. I am a man who has finally found a woman worth fighting for. And I will not surrender that without a battle. You think you are saving me from scandal. You are wrong. You are condemning me to a life of emptiness, of going through the motions of society without feeling, of existing without truly living. That is a far worse fate than any gossip could inflict. I love you, Arabella. I love your intelligence, your strength, your fierce independence. I love the way you challenge me and refuse to be impressed by titles or wealth. I love that you see me, truly see me, in a way no one else ever has. I don't care what Lady Victoria says. I don't care what the ton thinks. I care about you, only you. Tonight there is a ball at Carlton House. I am requesting, no, I am begging, that you attend. Wear your finest gown. Stand beside me. Show London society that we are stronger than their petty cruelty. Fight for us, Arabella, as I am fighting for you. If you do not come, I will understand. I will respect your decision. But know that I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I did not fight harder to keep you. Yours, in this life and any other, Sebastian. Arabella read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. He loved her. The Duke of Ravencrest loved her. Plain, practical, unfashionable Arabella Sinclair, and he was asking her to be brave. "Catherine," she called, her voice breaking. "Catherine, I need your help." Her sister burst into the room, eyes wide with hope. "Bella?" I need a gown. The most beautiful gown we can manage. Arabella stood, wiping her tears, her spine straightening with determination. And I need someone to dress my hair properly. If I'm going to battle, I'm going to look like I belong on the battlefield. Catherine's face split into a radiant smile. Now that's the sister I know. Carlton House blazed with light, its windows glowing like jewels against the night sky. Every member of London's elite society had crowded into the Prince Regent's magnificent residence for what promised to be the event of the season. Sebastian stood near the entrance to the ballroom, his evening clothes immaculate, his expression carefully controlled. Edmund hovered nearby, watching his friend with concern. "She may not come," Edmund said quietly. "I know. If she doesn't, what will you do?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Fight harder." Lady Victoria Huntington swept past in a confection of pink silk and diamonds, deliberately positioning herself in Sebastian's line of sight. "Your Grace, how magnificent you look this evening. I do hope you'll save me a waltz." "I'm afraid all my dances are spoken for, Lady Victoria." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh? By whom?" "By the only woman whose company I desire." Lady Eleanor Fitzwilliam joined them, her smile sharp as a blade. "How romantic, Your Grace. Though I did hear that the object of your affection has been somewhat elusive lately. Perhaps she's realized the unsuitability of the match." "Perhaps," Sebastian said coldly. "She's been recovering from the vicious attacks on her character by women whose jealousy has stripped them of all decency and grace." Lady Eleanor's face flushed red. "Your Grace, You merely engaged in malicious gossip designed to destroy an innocent woman's reputation. I know exactly what you did, Lady Eleanor, and I find it contemptible." The women retreated, whispering furiously between themselves. Edmund grinned. "Well, that bridge is thoroughly burned. Good riddance." The clock struck 9, then past. Sebastian's hands clenched at his sides. She wasn't coming. She had decided that protecting him was more important than fighting for them. He would call on her tomorrow, force her to hear him, make her understand that he could not give up on what they had found together. Then, at 9:15, a ripple of whispers spread through the ballroom. Heads turned toward the entrance. Sebastian's heart stopped. Arabella stood at the top of the grand staircase, and she was magnificent. Catherine had worked a miracle. Arabella's chestnut hair was dressed in an elegant style that framed her face beautifully. Her gown, a deep sapphire silk that brought out the gold in her hazel eyes, was simple but exquisitely cut, emphasizing her figure without the excessive ornamentation favored by fashionable ladies. She wore no jewelry except her mother's pearl earrings. She didn't look like a typical London beauty. She looked better. She looked real, strong, genuine, like a woman who knew her own worth and dared the world to challenge it. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and Sebastian felt his entire world narrow to that single point of connection. He began walking toward her, the crowd parting before him. Whispers followed in his wake, scandalized, curious, gleeful. He ignored them all. When he reached the foot of the stairs, he looked up at her and smiled. "You came. You asked me to fight." Her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm here to fight." Sebastian ascended the stairs and offered his hand. "Then let's give them something to talk about." Arabella placed her hand in his, and together they descended into the ballroom. Every eye was upon them. Every tongue was poised to whisper. Sebastian led her directly to the center of the floor as the orchestra struck up a waltz. "I can't dance very well," Arabella whispered as he took her in his arms. "Neither can I. We'll muddle through together." They began to move, slightly out of step, slightly awkward, and utterly perfect. Around them other couples joined the dance, but Sebastian saw only Arabella. Her flushed cheeks, her determined expression, her eyes that held his with fierce courage. "I love you," he said quietly. "I should have said it sooner. I should have said it every day since I met you. I love you, Arabella Sinclair, and I want to marry you." Her foot caught on his. She stumbled. He caught her, holding her closer. "What? Marry me. Be my Duchess. Stand beside me for the rest of our lives, and let me prove every day that you are the most remarkable woman I've ever known." "Sebastian, Her eyes filled with tears. "People will talk. They'll say I trapped you. They'll say, Let them say whatever they want. I'm asking you, Arabella, not society, not the ton, you. Do you love me? The question hung between them, more important than any gossip, any scandal, any social consideration. Yes, she whispered. Heaven help me, yes. I love you so much it terrifies me. Then marry me. Be terrified with me, build a life with me. Give me children who have your intelligence and courage. Grow old with me at Meadowbrook Hall and Ravencrest Manor. Say yes. Arabella looked into his eyes, those storm-grey eyes that saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had, and made her choice. Yes, she said clearly, loudly enough that nearby couples could hear. Yes, Sebastian Hartley. I will marry you. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, and exclamations rippled through the crowd like a wave. Sebastian pulled Arabella closer and kissed her, right there in the middle of Carlton House Ballroom, in full view of London society. When they finally broke apart, breathless and grinning like fools, Edmund was applauding loudly. Lady Beatrice Wentworth was smiling with genuine warmth. Even the Prince Regent, watching from his dais, raised his glass in salute. Lady Victoria and Lady Eleanor stood frozen, their faces masks of shock and fury. Sebastian turned to address the assembled crowd, his arm around Arabella's waist. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present my betrothed, Lady Arabella Sinclair, who has done me the extraordinary honor of agreeing to become my wife. More whispers, some disapproving, some delighted. Sebastian didn't care about any of them. He only cared about the woman beside him, whose hand gripped his with fierce determination, whose head was held high despite the scrutiny, whose love had transformed his entire world. The engagement was formally announced in the Times the following morning. Reactions were mixed. Some approved, some disapproved, but everyone had an opinion. The wedding was set for 6 weeks hence, to take place at the chapel at Ravencrest Manor. Arabella insisted on a relatively small ceremony, despite Sebastian's willingness to stage a grand society wedding. I don't need to prove anything to them, she told him during one of their properly chaperoned afternoon visits. I only need to marry you. Those 6 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Catherine was ecstatic, throwing herself into wedding preparations with enthusiasm. Mr. Whitmore arrived from Meadowbrook Hall to give his blessing and to ensure all legal matters were properly arranged. Sebastian's mother, the Dowager Duchess of Ravencrest, travelled from Bath to meet her future daughter-in-law. So you're the woman who finally captured my impossible son, the Dowager said, studying Arabella with shrewd blue eyes. She was an elegant woman in her 50s, with silver hair and an expression of perpetual amusement. I didn't capture him, Your Grace, Arabella replied honestly. I tried very hard to avoid him, actually. The Dowager laughed, a genuine sound of delight. Oh, I like you. Sebastian, you've chosen well. She has spine. I know, Sebastian said, smiling at Arabella, with such open affection that the Dowager's eyes softened. You love each other, she observed. Truly love each other. That's rare in our world. Guard it carefully. Lady Victoria made one final attempt to sabotage the wedding. 2 weeks before the ceremony, she spread a rumor that Arabella had been secretly engaged to another man, a tenant farmer at Meadowbrook, and had broken the engagement only when the Duke showed interest. The rumor was thoroughly debunked when Mr. Whitmore produced documentation showing that no such engagement had ever existed and publicly challenged Lady Victoria to provide evidence for her claims. She could not. I should call her out, Sebastian growled when he heard about the incident. You will do no such thing, Arabella said firmly. She's desperate and pathetic. The best revenge is our happiness. When did you become so wise? When I decided to trust you. She reached up to cup his face. You've taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to be imperfect together. He kissed her palm. I love you. I love you too. Even when you're being a dramatic, overprotective duke. Especially then, I hope. Especially then. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with autumn sunlight turning the grounds of Ravencrest Manor into a tapestry of gold and crimson. The chapel, a small stone building on the estate that had witnessed 3 centuries of Hartley family weddings, was filled with friends, family, and a carefully curated selection of society figures. Catherine served as maid of honor, her joy so radiant that several young gentlemen in attendance fell instantly in love with her. Edmund stood as Sebastian's best man, grinning broadly throughout the ceremony. But when Arabella walked down the aisle on Mr. Whitmore's arm, wearing a gown of ivory silk and her mother's pearls, Sebastian saw only her, his best friend, his greatest challenge, his truest love. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through whatever storms life might bring. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Sebastian kissed his bride with a tenderness that made several ladies weep. The wedding breakfast was held in the grand ballroom of Ravencrest Manor. Toasts were offered, stories shared, laughter exchanged. Lady Beatrice Wentworth congratulated Arabella warmly. Even some of the society matrons who had initially disapproved seemed charmed by the genuine affection between the newlyweds. As evening fell, Sebastian led Arabella out onto the terrace, away from the celebrations. "Happy, wife?" he asked, pulling her close. "Deliriously," she admitted, "though I keep expecting to wake up and discover this was all a dream." "If it is, we're dreaming together." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I have a wedding gift for you. Sebastian, you've already given me too much." "Hush. This is important." He pulled a folded document from his jacket. "The deed to Meadowbrook Hall. I'm signing it over to you along with a substantial trust that will ensure the estate can thrive for generations. Your father entrusted it to you, and I want to ensure it remains yours, not absorbed into the Ravencrest holdings, but independent and secure." Arabella's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that? You are my partner, Arabella. My equal, not my dependent. Meadowbrook is your legacy, and our children will inherit both estates, yours and mine, with equal pride." "Our children." She smiled through her tears. "I like the sound of that. So do I." He pulled her closer, his hand resting on her waist. "Shall we work on that project sooner rather than later? Your Grace, we're still at our wedding breakfast. Then let's retire early, for the sake of propriety." Arabella laughed, the sound echoing across the terrace. "You're impossible. You love me anyway." "I do. Heaven help me, I truly do." 3 years later. The nursery at Meadowbrook Hall was filled with afternoon sunlight and the sound of a baby's gurgling laughter. Arabella sat in the rocking chair by the window, cradling their son, Edward Sebastian Hartley, heir to the Duchy of Ravencrest, as he played with her fingers. At 18 months, Edward had his father's dark hair and his mother's hazel eyes. He was precocious, curious, and absolutely tyrannical in his demands for attention. "He has your stubbornness," Sebastian observed from the doorway, watching his wife and son with an expression of such complete contentment that it transformed his usually austere features. "He has your imperious nature," Arabella countered. "Yesterday he threw his porridge at the nursemaid when she tried to feed him peas." A gentleman of discerning taste. Sebastian crossed the room and bent to kiss his son's head, then his wife's lips. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Nauseated. Absolutely enormous." Arabella placed a hand on her swollen belly, where their second child grew. "This baby is far more active than Edward was. Perhaps we're having a daughter with your fierce spirit. Heaven help us all." Sebastian laughed and settled onto the window seat beside them. Through the window, Meadowbrook Hall's fields stretched out in neat, productive rows. The estate was thriving under Arabella's management. Yields up, tenants prosperous, buildings maintained. She had proven to be as brilliant a landowner as her father had been. Catherine had married Lord Edmund Fairfax the previous summer, in a love match that surprised no one who knew them. They lived half the year at Edmund's estate in Kent, and half in London, where Catherine had become a leading patroness of several charitable causes. Mr. Whitmore had retired from active practice, but remained a trusted advisor and frequent visitor to both Meadowbrook and Ravencrest Manor. Even the Dowager Duchess had become a devoted grandmother, spending months at a time at their estates and spoiling Edward outrageously. As for Lady Victoria Huntington and Lady Eleanor Fitzwilliam, they had both made marriages of convenience to wealthy but unremarkable gentlemen. They no longer moved in the Duke and Duchess of Ravencrest's social circles. "Do you ever regret it?" Arabella asked suddenly. "Choosing me? Enduring all that gossip and scandal?" Sebastian looked at her, truly looked at her, taking in her slightly disheveled hair, the baby drool on her shoulder, the ink stain on her fingers from her morning correspondence, the fierce intelligence in her eyes. "Never," he said firmly. "You are the best decision I ever made. the only decision that truly mattered, even though I'm not a conventional duchess. Especially because you're not conventional. You challenge me. You inspire me. You make me want to be a better man. He reached out to touch her face. And you love me, not my title, not my wealth, but me. That's worth more than all the approval of society combined. Edward made a grab for his father's cravat, successfully pulling it askew. Arabella laughed, the sound filling the sunny nursery with warmth. Our son has impeccable timing, Sebastian observed, carefully extracting his neckcloth from the baby's grip. He learned from the best. Arabella stood. Edward balanced on her hip despite her pregnancy. Come, it's time for his afternoon walk, and you promised to help me review the planting schedules for next spring. Estate management and childcare, the glamorous life of a duke. Having regrets? Sebastian stood and took his son from her arms, settling the boy against his shoulder with practiced ease. Not a single one. This, you, Edward, the baby to come, our life together, this is everything I never knew I needed. They walked together through Meadowbrook Hall, their voices blending in conversation about crop rotation and tenant cottages and whether Edward needed new shoes. It was prosaic, domestic, utterly unglamorous. It was perfect. That evening, after Edward was asleep and the household settled for the night, Sebastian and Arabella sat together in the library, her head resting on his shoulder, his hand resting protectively on her belly. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I'm thinking about the night we met, when you refused to dance with me. I was terrified of you. You hid it well. You looked at me as though I were an annoyance to be endured. You were an annoyance, a devastatingly handsome, persistently charming annoyance." Sebastian chuckled. "If I could go back to that night knowing everything that would come after, the gossip, the scandal, the battles we'd have to fight, I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." "So would I." Arabella lifted her head to look at him. "I was so convinced that love couldn't possibly come for someone like me, that I wasn't worthy of it. And now? Now I know that love isn't about worth. It's about courage. The courage to trust. The courage to be vulnerable. The courage to believe that happiness is possible, even when every logical part of your brain says otherwise." "When did you become so wise?" Sebastian asked, echoing his question from years earlier. Arabella smiled, the same smile she'd given him then. "When I decided to trust you." He kissed her, soft, sweet, filled with the promise of years yet to come, years of laughter and arguments, of children and grandchildren, of managing estates and navigating society, of growing old together at Meadowbrook and Ravencrest. Years of love. Outside, autumn stars glittered over the English countryside. Inside Meadowbrook Hall, the Duke and Duchess of Ravencrest sat together in comfortable silence, their future stretching before them like an open road. Arabella had been wrong about so many things. Wrong about her unworthiness. Wrong about love passing her by. Wrong about fairy tales being only for beautiful, fashionable women. Love had come for her after all, not because she was perfect, but because she'd been brave enough to believe she deserved it. And that, she thought as Sebastian's arms tightened around her, made all the difference. The end. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We hope it touched your heart as deeply as it touched ours while creating it. If you enjoyed this romantic journey, please subscribe to our channel, leave a like, share it with someone who loves a good love story, and leave us a comment. We read them all with great joy. Your support truly keeps us going, from the bottom of our hearts, and inspires us to continue telling stories full of love, redemption, and unforgettable twists. At the end of this video, another story suggestion will appear. Click it and let yourself be surprised by another beautiful tale of love and courage. Thank you for being here. The Legends of the Fall team.